Here's your friendly time walker with another important message and lore video at the same time. How generous am I? Well, not that generous, to be honest. I like to offer the benefit of the doubt to people, but there are some people in this world that only God knows what's going inside their tiny little skulls. And for this episode, we're going to be taking a look at people that say that the internment camps are like this horrible monstrosity that happened to the Horde, and the people that made an analogy between the internment camps and black slaves in America. Boy, that's a hard one. So let's get into it. First, let's tackle the internment camps and the accusation that they are this horrible thing that the Alliance has done to the Horde and to orcs in general. First of all, that's not true. If we look at the history tells us very clearly that the orcs are an alien invading race that have decided to come to Azeroth and, destroy almost every living thing on this planet. Poor Stormwind had to feel that the first time. Lordaeron almost felt it the second time. Quel'Thalas the same. There's no more rules in Cardaro that work because, the orcs decided to be a little bit, naughty. So yeah, let's not act like the internment camps didn't happen for a good reason, that is. They happened for a good reason. And quite frankly, it was the most humane option. Because we should have listened to Trollbane and Gil and the Greymane. Butcher the monsters to the sword. Put them to the sword. Make sure none of them are left. Because the internment camps create only problems for the Alliance. What problems, you might ask? Well, there is this little concept that we have in the real world, and it's called taxes. And let me tell you, people don't really like taxes. At all. You know what people don't like even more than taxes? When their taxes go up for a stupid project that doesn't benefit them. When there are clearly better solutions out there. For example, why should we spend a lot of money to create internment camps for a race that didn't really give a shit about us? For a race that was so willing to take us and destroy us and leave us with nothing. You can understand why Greymane and Trollbane decided they care more about their people than they care about orcs. It makes sense. And this is how the Alliance fell, because King Tyrannus, in his wisdom, decided it's a good idea to keep the monsters that wanted you dead, that will have no quarrel in destroying everything you hold dear for their own amusement. Even Ogrim Doomhammer took pleasure into the sound of tortured humans. And Doomhammer wasn't a lunatic like Hellscream or, what was his name again? The Bone Chewer guy. No. Ogrim Doomhammer was one of the more normal ones, alongside Durotan. So if he can feel that, there's not really much chances for that to go any better than it did, in fact. So thus, the internment camps were a solution to make sure that this race that wanted you dead and wanted to exterminate you won't do it. And that's the problem, because people seem to be like, it's so bad and they look like this aspect. This one aspect. Here's an example from Romanian history. People look at Vlad Țepeș, the Impaler, Dracula, whatever you want to call him, as this horrible monsters that put a spear through his enemies and through humans, without really considering that the enemies were the Ottomans and they were not that nice of people, especially to Vlad, especially to the other Romanians. Let's just say they were nice to hang around with. And I think most of my followers from Eastern Europe and the Balkans kind of understand that. It wasn't that bad. It looks bad when you look at itself, like this is bad. But when you look at the grander scheme of things, you start to have a better understanding. Like the internment camps. The fact that they were a humane solution to putting them to the sword. Luckily for King Tyrannus, the mages of Dalaran decided, yeah, we should support that. Antonidas even went as far as trying to cure it. I'm not sure what went through his head. None of my sources indicate that he had any damage at his cerebral cortex or front lobe to come up with this idea, but he did try to do that until he kind of gave up and decided, that, the orcs will solve their own problems. And unfortunately, they did. Going back to the internment camps, we have to take into consideration that internment camps were not this horrible place. They were not something akin to a gulag, for example. They were not a gulag. They were a prison. And now let's roll into my second point, into the second point of this argument. The bad one, the one in which people compare the internment camps to slavery. I wish I could make fun of this, and I probably will make a little bit fun of it, but this is just stupid. How can you come up with such a moronic idea? First of all, to compare orcs to black people, which by itself is racist, and then to compare the internment camps, which were prisons, to slave ranches. So first of all, let's look at this. The internment camps were first of all prisons. That means they had a warden, they had guards, and there was supposed to be peace there. They were not used to pick cotton. They were not used to do any manual labor at all. They were basically prisoners of war that just stood around and did nothing. And they became lethargic thanks to the fact that they were dumb enough to believe the hunch new guy that just happened to be green and just promised them that if they turn green, they can be strong too. So yeah, I don't think there were black people from Africa that decided to invade the 13 colonies and then they just put them in camps. Or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is a part of history that's hidden to us, like the shape of the earth. Haha. Anyway, going back to the subject at hand. No, they were not slave ranches. They couldn't be. They never used them for anything else besides just standing there. And I think it would be quite boring to just look at orcs just standing and doing nothing. But now you might ask, what about the pit fights? Yes, the pit fights. The pit fights. Those are the ones that they used them as slaves. No, they didn't. I'm sorry to burst your bubble. We only know of only one pit fighting ring, whatever you want to call it. And that's in Durnhold. And what is Durnhold? The fortress of Blackmoor. And we all know Blackmoor was a douche. Not a nice guy. It didn't matter your race, just Blackmoor was a douche. What can you do about it, eh? So we only know of one pit fight. And we only know of one orc that really fought in them. And that's Thrall. An orc that Blackmoor raised specifically to be a warrior and a general. He was too drunk to properly do his job though, and kind of alienated Thrall from him. But that's a different story. So one orc going into the pit fights because a madman decided it's a good idea to make an army of orcs. And I'm going to make this orc specifically, I'm going to groom him to be the general, is not an example of slavery. The orcs in internment camps are not an example of slavery. And they will never be. Because internment camps are prisons, not cotton fields. And it's fucking disgusting to even try and make a comparison between the two. They're just different things altogether. And needless to say that this whole using internment camps as this way to show that Blizzard is racistus and it suffers from internal racism and other stuff, other buzzwords, is just dumb. It's just dumb as hell. As I said before, the internment camps were prisons. They didn't use orcs to plow fields or braise cattle, even though I think they can't do that. I honestly think that orcs are too dumb to know how to do that. But they could make weapons. So that's an advantage for them. So yeah, if you see somebody talk about racismus in the internment camps, just understand that, well, after a few incidents, you're not going to be that friendly to your enemy. So, the internment camps are good solutions. It's a video game. At the end of the day, it's a goddamn video game that people want to project their dumb ideas and their fantasies to it. A black person isn't an orc as much as you might want it to be. No normal person would ever look at an orc. No normal person would ever write an orc, make an orc, and be like, yes, this orc is a representation of black people because I think blacks are green or something. And they have tusks and long ears and are very good warriors. We know that no normal person will ever think of that. I think the only people that really think about that are the people that just want to virtue signal, the people that want to be offended and win some friendship points, ally points, whatever. And they just decide, I'm gonna fight this. Even though it's dumb as heck, it doesn't make any sense. And it's an insult to everybody that has ever created anything related to orcs in fantasy. And the same morons will write papers, and other morons will cite their stupid papers that are just completely nonsensical. So if you ever see somebody describe the internment camps as an allegory for slavery, or come up with a dumb paper that says that, even if they cite it or not, just tell them they're morons. There is no point in playing chess with a pigeon that will just shit on the board.